You're listening to Inside Eyes, and I'm your host, Laura Northrup. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Inside Eyes. I'm your host, Laura Northrup, and this series is about the use of entheogens and psychedelics to heal from sexual trauma. In today's episode, I interview Jennifer Patterson. Jennifer is an herbalist and grief worker living in New York City. So how I came to know Jennifer is that a mutual friend had told me she was a good person to talk with about entheogens and psychedelics, and also recommended that I check out the book she edited called Queering Sexual Violence. I was already very interested in speaking with Jennifer about psychedelics, but after I started reading Queering Sexual Violence, I absolutely knew I needed to interview her for this series. If you have not seen the book, definitely check it out. There's a link in the show notes. It has many brilliant essays by a wide range of incredible writers. So for this interview, I managed to meet up with Jennifer while I was visiting New York for the Horizons Conference, which means you may hear some background city noise due to my incredible audio recording skills and New York's amazing ability to be loud 24 hours a day. For some context, she's being interviewed for this series as a survivor, but she's also a healer, so we weave in and out of those realms in our conversation. A word of caution. None of the episodes in this series are suitable for children, and the topics are emotionally evocative. Please take care of yourself as the listener. So the interview starts with me asking Jennifer to talk a little bit about how she came to the world of psychedelics. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being here and talking with me today. And to start, I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about your life and how you came to a place of trying out psychedelics.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here. I was in my early 30s, and so I had experienced multiple forms of trauma throughout my life. I was raped when I was 19. I experienced a physical assault when I was about 22 or 23 that resulted in fractured ribs. I had another physical assault when I was in my later 20s, and I had a lot of childhood trauma, and I had been in and out of therapy for years. I had been on antidepressants and anti-anxiety pills and mood stabilizer pills, lots of them for years. And there wasn't enough movement. Like, I didn't feel like, I was trying to do the things, but like the things weren't getting me to a place that felt different for me. And I met somebody who was doing a lot of work around psychedelics, and she had done a lot of personal work with psychedelics and some facilitation work. She and another person kind of were having conversations with me about psychedelics. And actually, I kind of grew up, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I grew up with DARE, and I was like, do not go near drugs, and I also, I struggled a lot with alcohol use in my 20s. It was a pretty major issue. I got a DUI. I had to take some responsibility for some of the ways it was impacting my relationships. And so I always was just like, I'm just not gonna go near drugs. I know that it's already difficult with alcohol. I'm just gonna stay where I'm at and not do drugs.
When people were talking with you about psychedelics, were you sober at that point?
I was not sober. And it's interesting, my journey with alcohol has not really resulted in sobriety almost ever. I've done a month here and there of not drinking, or a few months after working with some psychedelics just felt like I didn't want to drink. But my psychedelic use actually helped me change my relationship with alcohol. When I was introduced to the idea of psychedelics, it came from a place where psychedelics can be healing. Psychedelics help people navigate substance misuse and addiction, different trauma experiences. And so I didn't even know that was a thing. I had never known about it. So immediately I was like, I know all kinds of people who need to do this work. And I was like, this person and my ex and, all these people. And it took me 10 months to be like, oh, wait, maybe I need to do this work.
Oh, you were excited for other people to do it before you had done it.
Yeah.
I love that.
I was like, this sounds amazing, because we were specifically talking about Iboga.
Uh-huh.
And Iboga is often spoken about as it's not a cure for opiate use and misuse. It's definitely a tool that helps. It interrupts the physical dependency of opiates. So it's often used as an antidote to addiction. And, people use it for other things too. And it's like, there's definitely psycho-spiritual experiences. There's, I experienced a lot of relief from my alcohol misuse with it. But yeah, I was very excited for other people. And it took me a while to be like, oh, maybe I should do this thing for myself.
Well, I'm curious to ask you about the kind of experience of starting out, trying out psychedelics as your healing journey. But first, I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about what you feel, what was happening in your life, like, for lack of a better word, what were your symptoms like that were leading you to a place of wanting to do more healing and look at this option of psychedelics, despite the fact that you had done a lot of therapy and, had been obviously really trying and doing a lot of healing already.
Yeah, I mean, I was in and out of therapy in my 20s. I also went to a therapist as a child, a very young child. And so I've been in and out of therapy for 30 years. It's interesting because a lot of my background is doing work around trauma and sexual violence. And I worked as a rape crisis counselor in an emergency room. And I think I was really good at helping other people navigate the impact of trauma and like the symptoms of PTSD and complex PTSD. But like I had a very hard time understanding my own experience. Like it felt very far away from me. And yeah, it showed up in like alcohol use. I mean, I felt a lot of relief with alcohol for a long time. I experienced a lot of disconnection from my body. Like I'm a writer and like a lot of my writing in my 20s is me just trying to locate my body. Like I had no understanding really of like what was happening. Like I was like below my hips, I don't know. Like what is down? Are legs down there? Maybe they are. And so I experienced, a real disconnection from my body. I also I think a big one for me was like just a real disconnection from myself and like a real mistrust of myself and a real lack of ability to like actualize myself. Like I like had lost connection to spirit or source or whatever. And I had lost connection to myself. And I also experienced like a lot of attachment issues. I've had a couple long-term relationships, but they've been really fraught with a lot of conflict, a lot of, like my last longer-term relationship, I think I started, while I was doing all of the psychedelic work and healing work, I really started to learn the depth of my abandonment issues and like how that showed up for me in many relationships, even like friendships. And so it was something that like, it felt huge. And that was actually what led me to first work with Iboga was I was in a new relationship and I felt really out of my league. And I felt like I was really broken and like really fucked. And it felt critical that I took a different direction with my healing. Like it felt like I needed to do something really big.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're saying that you kind of got in touch with how much shame that you were feeling in connection to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And like really, like I felt like I had a real inability to like build, I mean, healthy is a loaded word, but like I couldn't build healthy relationships that like, like in my early 20s, I experienced myself as like a very avoidant person. Like most of my partners in my early 20s and mid 20s, like experienced me as very cold, as very distant, as like too independent, as like a loner, like I would just like disappear. My emotions would get so big or I'd get super triggered and I just like could not communicate from the inside. Okay. Yeah. And then in my later 20s and 30s, like I feel like I became much more anxious and like really panicked about losing people and like really, and I think a lot of that has to do with like, I don't have the experience really of having like, I think I was the most reliable person in my life for most of my life. So like, if I experienced another person that was like able to give me care and support, like I really didn't want to lose them, which of course results in losing people oftentimes.
Right? Yeah, so. When you're like, but I really want to.
Can't we just be together?
Super control this dynamic
every day.
Yeah.
Because like there was a real, before I started working with psychedelics and even, in the last few years, like I didn't want to be in my life. Like I've had a lot of moments of suicidal ideation throughout my life from a very young age. but like there is like a lower level of just like, I don't want to be here. Like, I don't want to be here at all. And I think too, like the reason I want to talk about that is like, I think suicidal ideation is like, to be alive, I think, is to not want to be here sometimes. Like, I think most people, I'm just from the work that I do and talking to people and like people, and like, it's like, sometimes we don't want to be here. And I think there's like a destigmatization that like feels useful in just being able to be like, yeah, we don't always want to be here. But, you know, sometimes it would get really big for me. And finding people that could kind of hold me in those places felt like really important to keep. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're bringing up the suicidality thing because I totally agree that, you know, it's a part of human experience to sometimes wonder or have feelings like, do I want to be here in this?
I keep opting into this bullshit? Maybe not.
But also I think it's something that people who have experienced sexual trauma have often suicidal feelings or have episodes of feeling suicidal, and just people who have experienced childhood trauma, because, you know, life can just things can feel so overwhelming and emotions can feel so overwhelming. And I'm wondering if you feel comfortable saying anything about like when you did get into feeling really suicidal, if there was a sense of why you were feeling that way or what was driving you to that kind of place.
I really think that a lot of it is related to like loss of connection and the idea of losing more than I've already lost felt like intolerable to some degree, which I think, you know, also I think like when I think that the work has been done, of course, there's always more work. And like, I feel like in the last year, I've had a really strong experience of like, what has been hard is that I'm often like, there is a very tiny, that sometimes gets huge part of me that's just like, I'm fucking tired of taking care of myself, tired of doing it. I'm good at it. I know how to do it. I've kept myself alive. I'm still here. It would be nice to not have to do it all the time. And that's something that like I feel like I often would put on my partners or like some of my friendships where it's like, I need you to help me stay here.
I love that you're bringing up this piece around disconnection because I think that is such a big thing that happens in traumatic experiences, especially when there's a traumatic experience where someone else is involved, which all sexual trauma tends to have another person who's involved. And whether that means that there's a profound disconnection happening between those people, like the person who is experiencing the trauma and the person who's causing it, or whether it's all the things that happen after the traumatic events of not being believed, not being supported, all different kinds of things, but that there can be just such an intense sense of disconnection that can happen. Yeah. And then, of course, with childhood trauma, the sky's the limit in terms of how important connection is as a kid. Totally. And how terrifying it is to feel disconnected.
Yeah. And not being, like the childhood trauma that I experienced was, a lot of it was, you know, it was by both parents. Like my father was maybe, you know, could be considered the more actively harmful person. I experienced a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of verbal abuse, a little bit of physical abuse. There are many ways that the trauma manifested in lots of known ways and ways I'm still coming to terms with. And, you know, like it went on my whole life. Like it went on until I was 17 years old, until my mother finally left my dad. My mom and I have had a lot of hard conversations over the years, especially after doing so much psychedelic work, where I really kind of sat with the harm that existed by the impact of both of my relationships with my parents. There was a way where it was like I took on a role, and I also feel like I was asked in different ways to take on the role of being a caretaker for my mom. You know, like I was the oldest child. I was also the most outspoken, and I, like my therapist, who I was seeing for years, who I had lots of important work done with, often would say, like, you've been a fighter for a really long time. And like that, I was a firecracker. I was told I had a very bad attitude, which just meant that I like stood up for myself and tried to protect other people in my family too. You know, I felt like I had to take on a lot as a child. And that, that meant that I have had to do some repair work with my mom, and like we've had to have conversations. But like my mom also, like she listens, and it's hard for her to hold. It's hard for her to really like hold the impact of it all. But she's also like, I appreciate that she like will remind me sometimes and with more clarity that like she was also in an abusive relationship. And so she was doing what she could, like, and what made sense for what she was trying to protect us in the best way possible. And like, it didn't feel like that, but like, that was what was happening.
Yeah. Such a complicated thing around doing healing work with our parents or family members, or really with anyone. It's so useful if you can remember that people really are doing their best. And sometimes their best is either not good enough or harmful.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it is that, what they know how to do at the time. And yeah. One thing that I'm interested in asking people about in these interviews is about healing that people have experienced with what in some circles we call bystanders to abuse or to violence. And bystanders are people who are not the people who necessarily caused the harm, but they're the people who were around, that just were anybody who was around.
Yeah.
And it kind of sounds like you're saying with your mom that you experience her in some ways as a bystander to violence and abuse, and also in some ways as a person who has caused some harm for you as well.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about your psychedelic experiences and how there has or hasn't been any healing. It sounds like maybe there has been.
Yeah.
But in the work that you've done with psychedelics around that piece.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely have experienced some healing with my relationship with my mom, largely in working with Iboga and also other medicines too. But before I go into talking about Iboga, I also just want to say, like, Iboga feels like one of, I think there's lots of things to say, precautions or just fuller pictures around a lot of different psychedelics, but Iboga in particular carries more risk than a lot of psychedelics. There's heart risk, there's other risks involved. And so Iboga often, it is very important to either work with a practitioner that knows how Iboga will manifest in the body and has a lot of experience, or at a clinic that you really like do a lot of background checks on, because there's a lot of harm and violence existing in Iboga clinics across the world. And also Iboga is specifically, it has a deep cultural and spiritual tradition in West Africa, and it's a plant that grows in West Africa, and it's used by the Bwiti. And so they're with kind of like the blooming of so much psychedelic conversation in the world, and Michael Pollan's book, which I have not read, which I don't plan to. I think there's a lot to say around spiritual tourism and like people, like bringing, I just read this beautiful and difficult piece from Peru, from the Shipibo tradition of basically talking about how like US and European, largely white people are coming to do this spiritual work to like heal the ills of the industrialized world. And like I think it's really important to be aware of like what kind of energy we're bringing to these medicines. I think there's a false narrative of like, oh, we're just going to do psychedelics and we're going to be like so evolved then. And like, actually that's not always what happens. And there is a lot of violence that we can bring to communities that like, we leave it there. And so, yeah, I just think that it's not an easy conversation, and there's a lot of exploitation that occurs within a lot of medicines. So it's important to really be working with people that have like a deep and sustained relationship with both the plants and then the traditions, like in a way that's like not appropriative, but like in deep reverence.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. I'm hearing you say two main things, and one is Iboga is a medicine that has a lot of risk, and people should be very careful if they are going to embark on taking Iboga, that they should do a lot of research. Definitely not something you would be just taking by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then two is this huge piece that I'm so glad you're bringing into the conversation, that is getting more and more talked about and important to really address right now because of the, quote, psychedelic renaissance that's happening and all of the psychedelic and spiritual tourism that goes on. And I know there's no right answer.
No, there isn't.
This.
It's like an ongoing conversation.
It's an ongoing conversation. Yeah. But it sounds like one thing that you're hoping for is that people who are going to be accessing these medicines that are white people from the United States or Europe are accessing them through a means that feels vetted, that whoever they're using these medicines with are people who are grounding it in tradition and connected to the communities that steward these plants.
Yeah.
And also that there is an awareness around the impact that there is by even practicing with these medicines.
There's so many ways that the impact exists. And, like from like sustainability of the plants to like, in this piece I was reading, it's like healers that have been in their communities for lifetimes, decades, generations, because of the like boom in Peru and in other places. It's like they're leaving the communities to like be a part of these centers, which makes sense. It's like, you got to go where the money is sometimes, but like, there's just like, we just don't know the impact of it, like then that means like the healer is leaving the community. So it's like, there are so many ways that it's impacted. And it's just, I think it's like a very much an ongoing conversation. These plants or these medicines or these psychedelics, like they're a part of something. They're a part of like a huge ecosystem of people and traditions and land. And, I think that many people are coming to them with like deep pain that they're working to navigate, which I think is important. And like, these are powerful, powerful medicines, but it's a both and. Yeah. It's like, in all things, it's like, how do we do something in a way that brings the least amount of harm, knowing that harm is always going to exist, most likely in many different ways. Like, how do we do the least? Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're living in capitalism. Yeah. And a host of bullshit going on. Yeah. So, and like a white supremacist patriarchy within the capitalism. Yeah. So yes, there's harm. Yeah. And I hear you that, it's also, there's no right answer, but there's some practices around it that you're advocating. So thank you for speaking to that. Totally. The article that Jennifer mentioned in this last little bit of conversation is about spiritual extractivism in Peru and the larger impact of foreigners using ayahuasca in or outside of Peru. There's a link in the show notes to the article. If you're considering embarking on a relationship with ayahuasca, please read this article. And while this conversation is mostly about Iboga and ayahuasca, I do want to say a word about an important plant medicine that needs protection growing right here in the United States. Peyote is native to some parts of the southern U.S., and it is a very important part of spiritual practices to some indigenous tribes of this land. And due to colonization, agriculture, the Native American genocide, and privatization of land, peyote is at high risk of endangerment. For more information on this, you can research the work of Don D. Davis, a member of the Shoshone tribe and a PhD candidate researching the destruction of peyote habitat. Next in our conversation, I asked Jennifer more about her actual experience in healing with psychedelics. Yeah, I've worked with a lot. I will say, like, someone having substance misuse issues, the ways that I enter into working with psychedelics, like when I was younger in my 20s, I was trying to lose myself. I was trying to find some kind of connection, I think, to myself too, but I was trying to leave. And for me, psychedelics have been a practice of really trying to stay. And also they're deep personal internal work tools. So it's very much, it is not about escaping at all. This work, if anything, it is really about staying in the trouble, to use a phrase I've been working with lately. Iboga was the first thing I worked with, which I'm a little bit of an extremist, and Iboga is widely known as the most powerful psychedelic in the world. I had smoked weed. I had never done a drug before. So I was amazing. Let's get it going. So, but also it was about access. Iboga is very hard to access, I think, in a quote unquote safe way, unless you're people are you need to go to a clinic to do that work, which I can see that because they have a medical staff. But I also again, in Gabon and in other parts of Africa, there is not a medical staff. There are spiritual people that have been working with these plants forever, and like that's the staff, you know. But I think it is being done underground. And again, there's risk. But like, so I worked with Iboga. Iboga is a 3 to 4 day experience. You're largely incapacitated for a very large chunk of it, which is why I was saying it's so important to have somebody who knows how to navigate that with you, because you need a lot of support. You're not really eating or drinking for possibly 2 days. You're not really moving from a bed for that long, except to go to the bathroom with support. It's an all-encompassing experience, and you need support. So that was the first thing I worked with, and it blew my mind. Like, totally blew my mind.
Yeah. Can you say, like, in part, maybe for people who have never experienced psychedelic, like, what was blowing your mind? What was that like?
Many people experience visions. Not all people do, but like you're in a state. Like if I open my eyes, it's like, oh, I know where I am. But like, the time piece too. It's like I think was seeing, for the first time at least, I was seeing visions for upwards of like 16 hours. And so that is already a long time, but like it felt like lifetimes. Like it felt like lifetimes on lifetimes, like maybe this is actually it. Like this is it. And so I spent the first, what felt like a couple hours spinning out. I'm trying to unlearn my control freak tendencies, which psychedelics have been really amazing for, because you have no fucking control. But yeah, I really got to see my control tendencies like huge. Like in the beginning, I was like, a myriad of things. Like, I'm doing this wrong. I can't even do psychedelics. I'm so fucked up. I can't even do psychedelics right. Like, and I really tried to control the experience, and that was very difficult. And Iboga, like many psychedelics, you really cannot, and it's actually about submitting to it and trusting. Like I've experienced a huge amount of trust in myself, in the world, in the unit, like in other people through these medicines. But yeah, I spent the first couple hours freaking out. A narrative that also kept running through my mind was like, it was so extreme that I was like, wow. Like I would shame myself, and then I would flip in. Like I was like, I'm so fucked up that this is what I was just like, you are, I cannot believe you did this to yourself. Like I cannot believe, wow, you're fucked, And then it would flip, and I would be like, whoa, I love myself so much, and I believe in myself so much that I gave myself this gift. It's a huge fucking gift, and it's like a real privilege. So they were happening at once, flipping around. Iboga's also like a real trickster, and there's like a lot of like slapsticky stuff that can happen. I mean, I saw a lot of rape, a lot of sexual violence, a lot of general violence.
You saw that in your visions?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Me, other people.
Were you afraid that you might see some of that beforehand?
I wasn't.
You weren't?
I think it's interesting. Like, I think everyone has their own experiences. Like, my brain is a wild place. Like, I experience maybe what some might call flashbacks, or just like reliving, like, all the time. It's something that I'm already living with. So I don't think I was worried that I would see things I didn't know or wasn't prepared for. I mean, I did end up seeing some things that I didn't fully know and wasn't prepared for, but there's a way where like I felt okay in those moments.
I ask because one of the concerns that sexual violence survivors have about taking psychedelics to heal is there's a lot of fear of re-experiencing the sexual violence. And it sounds like you saw visions of rape happening and that it did not feel re-traumatizing. I mean,
it definitely did not feel great. Yeah, it did. It did feel overwhelming. Iboga can move really fast, or at least for me, it did. So it was almost like, it was kind of like Pee-wee's Playhouse, where it was like a ball drops down a spout and like comes out, and then the water fountain turns on. Like it was like all of these things happening were like visions. So it would be like, this thing happens and then turns into this, and then this is happening. And it was like, and it would play on a loop sometimes. So it would just be like over and 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 over. And like I could not interrupt it. went on for as long as it needed to go on. So that was also something that's a thing that I think it's pretty specific to Iboga. There's like this loop that can happen where it's like you cannot get out of it until it stops. That felt very hard for me. It wasn't just violence that I saw. It would be like nonsensical stuff too, where I'm like, this is useless. But like I did see a lot of other things too. Like I had one moment where I saw my childhood or like young adulthood home, and there was this huge, like almost like a sailboat sail that just like erupted from the foundation and came up into the living room, and it just spun around. This huge sail just spun around, and it literally just turned everything to rubble. It felt very liberatory. And I wrote a poem, like a very short poem where it, like, I basically was like, this thing happened and it wasn't surprising. And in that vision, I also experienced, like, I had a very profound experience of feeling what my child self felt like what my body felt, like what I felt like as myself in my body as a child. It was terrifying, and it made everything make sense. I had like, and that was, I think, like probably the most prominent experience that I've had with Iboga is like, I started to make sense to myself. I was like, oh, wow, 8 years old. And like, that's how your body felt. Like everything makes sense now. And it wasn't even that complex. Like it was like a profound embodied state that I got access to.
Was it like fear or grief or anger?
All of it. And a profound sense of alone. Like I was very alone.
That disconnection.
I was really alone. Like really alone. There was no end. Like I think like I knew in my body, like this is going to continue. Doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I say. No one's coming to save me.
To clarify, that's part of the 8-year-old feeling is I'm so alone. There's all of these emotions, and I'm aware that this is just going to continue for, sounds like, not forever.
Yeah, not forever, but that's the place I would go to as an adult.
It feels that way.
Yeah, as a kid, it felt like that for sure. And like, that is the place that, you know, like with the attachment stuff, or like when I'm like super triggered around relationship, or like that is the place I go where I'm just like, oh my God, of course, because there's no way out, you know? And it's like a very overwhelming, I mean, it's a body, it's like a somatic experience that like just keeps happening. So it just helped me like put that into context in my life. I mean, I've also had this experience of like, I think the third time I did it, like really tracing the lineage of harm in my family, really coming to terms with like the violences that my ancestors and parents and grandparents and great-grandparents experienced. And like, you know, like seeing my father as a young child and as an adult and being like, oh, like how he is only a product of violence and trauma. Like we don't get to those places of profound disconnection from ourselves and committing harm on other people without it existing in our life. So I think it doesn't mean that I'm like going to like repair my relationship with my dad, who I don't speak to. It does mean that I kind of was like, oh, I wish he had someone to help him navigate that, because I don't think he does. And it can't be me. Part of me wanted it to be me. Like, I was like, I could do this. I do healing work now. Like, I could, but like, it can't be me. And it's not going to be. But yeah, that was important for me to feel, because it also helped me, you know, like psychedelics are this practice of like being in the in-between, like being between worlds, being between beliefs, being on like this long bridge between like two poles or two ends of a spectrum. And so there's a lot that exists there. And I think like it allowed me to have like a more complex understanding of my own experiences and other people's experiences that were useful to me.
Yeah. Sometimes I talk about like living in the complexity. And I think you're kind of speaking to this, and that sometimes when we experience trauma, we start to live in a not very complex place. Yeah. Like, I'm a victim, that's a perpetrator, or I'm a perpetrator, that's my victim, or, you know, just sort of the, I think, and I also want to say, I think in the mainstream world, when sexual violence or violence of any kind is acknowledged, we kind of only acknowledge it at that level. And a lot of people who cause harm are also survivors.
Totally.
And just the complexity of living in that is important. And it's one of the only ways we're ever going to end sexual violence or end violence, or at least, decrease it. And so I love that you're talking about that. And it sounds like psychedelics are a place where there's more room to open that up and sort of live in the complexity of it. Yeah. You don't have to talk to your dad ever again.
Doesn't mean forgiveness is like,
totally.
I'm also like, the first place I need to offer forgiveness is myself. It's like that, and it actually probably could stop there.
You don't have to do
you don't have to do that kind of repair work.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was meaningful for you to be able to just know and acknowledge this is a very hurt person who's hurting you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, like, none of these things negate or excuse away violence,
Absolutely.
It just, and I also, like, I experience it in my own life. It's like when I was younger and I was drinking all the time, like, I have a very sharp tongue. I've said very hurtful things to people. I've harmed people. Like, I am not, like, I've experienced a lot of violence, and, like, I think we all, there are obviously very egregious forms of violence, but, like, it's also a spectrum, like, I have also hurt people deeply. I've profoundly impacted people's lives, like, not just in an amazing way. And so, like, that was something that, like, I think I did some of that work outside of psychedelics. When I first started editing an anthology that I edited called Queering Sexual Violence, I started being like, here I am being this person that, like, is trying to do this work around sexual violence. And, like, while I have not sexually violated anybody, like, I have harmed people.
You're really speaking to something about restoring our humanity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, living in a place where you're only a victim or you're only a perpetrator is a place where you don't get to be a human. You don't get to be all those things. And obviously, some of us do really egregious types of violence. And I'm not saying that, we all do exactly the same things or anything.
Totally not, yeah.
But that we all have the capacity to harm, and we all have the capacity to heal, and we all have the capacity to do, to impact people in a positive way and offer love. And that it's a really profound thing to be able to restore that in yourself.
Yeah.
And I think we're a culture that really struggles with shame
and
processing shame. Yeah. And therefore it can be really difficult for us to acknowledge that we're all capable of harming people. So I want to ask you more, though, about your psychedelics experiences, and really specifically, you were saying that you had a sexual trauma when you were 19, that you were raped when you were 19. And I'm wondering about how that has impacted your life, and also about what kind of experiences you've had around psychedelics in relationship to that.
Yeah, I experienced rape when I was 19. It was by a friend, by someone that we went to high school together. I was in college at this point. He was in college at Penn State. We had an intimate relationship. We had not had, like, penetrative sex at that point. It was interesting. I had grown up with a lot of harm. And so when it happened, I did talk to people about it. I don't know if I had quite accurate language, but, like, it was something that I very quickly did reveal to people, but I didn't understand, I guess, how it impacted me. Like, very shortly after, I was suicidal. I couldn't get out of bed. I wasn't able to go to classes. My mom, she even thought maybe I should, like, leave college for a minute. And I actually didn't tell my mom that I was raped. She's a person I didn't tell for 4 years maybe after. I had, like, sexual experience, but, like, I had not had penetrative sex at that point with anybody yet. So I think I felt a lot of shame around, like, quote unquote, not being a virgin anymore. I was raised Catholic, and, like, even though, like, I had stopped going to church, like, there was a lot of, like, Catholic bullshit I had to unlearn, and I'm always unlearning. But yeah, I didn't tell my mom. And so she didn't really understand why I just was, she did. Like, I was very depressed as a child in high school. Like, it wasn't me being depressed was not new. The intensity of it was new. And so I think for many years, like, that felt like the biggest thing in the room, like in my personal internal room, where I was just like, this is a huge thing. I had a very confusing relationship to sexuality for quite some time. I am not straight. I had not noticed or acknowledged, or like, I don't know, like, I feel like I had my first queer date. I was just like, now I'm dating this queer person, you know, like it wasn't I don't feel like I came out, I guess, quote unquote, because I like told people, but like it was a very like, oh, now I'm just doing this. But like, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I love being queer, and queer is like, it's just like, what a gift I get to have all the fucking time to not have to date straight men. But yeah, with psychedelics, I think my relationship to the rape had already changed in some ways. And so when I worked with psychedelics, like the biggest thing in the room at that point was my attachment issues, and also like trying to, I also should say too, a big reason that I did Iboga for the first time was I also have trichotillomania, which is compulsive hair pulling. I think a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about it. For me, it was a very powerful tool of disconnection and dissociation that I had from childhood on. Yeah, it was something that like I needed. And it's also completely oppressive and overwhelming at different points in my life. You know, like Iboga is really useful for helping you shift your compulsive or impulsive or addictive, quote unquote, patterns. And so I wanted to explore that with Iboga because I knew it had roots in the trauma experience. And actually a vision that I saw in the first ceremony I did, because at that point, the facilitators would ask me some questions that I had written myself, like deep in the ceremony, which was hard to answer sometimes. Like I know, like even in that state, I still was like critical of, like, I didn't want to like reveal things or whatever. But one of the questions was like, what is the root of it, literally?
Of it meaning?
Of the trichotillomania.
Yeah.
And the vision I saw was like a huge neon sign that just said dad. And it just flashed over and over and over and over and over. And it was like, I already knew that. And it, you know, not my dad maybe as a person, but like what I was living with, I needed to intervene in what I was living with. And trichotillomania allowed me to like leave the world for a minute, for an hour, for fucking forever. I don't know. And, you know, I have to say, this is another thing I haven't even, but like so when I first did Iboga, I had agreed and committed to doing it. I didn't know it when I had agreed and like had signed up in my mind that it would require me coming off of all of the antidepressants and anti-anxiety pills I was on. So I had multiple that I was on at one point. At the lowest point, I had a doctor who was prescribing me many of them and just kept putting me on more, even though I would be like, I don't think this one's working. So I was on 4 antidepressants, mood stabilizers, and anti-anxiety pills. I was taking Klonopin as needed, but like I always was convinced it wasn't helping me, so I would take excess amounts. And because I could no longer stay awake in my own life, I was prescribed Adderall.
So you were taking Adderall, Klonopin, and...
Wellbutrin, Lamictal, Topamax, something else. I mean, there's so many.
And these were all at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was like, I would say that was like my mid to like, I don't know, like 26, let's just say. It had a huge impact on my life. I like couldn't function. I didn't know what was happening internally. Like I didn't know what was a symptom, what was PTSD, what was depression. At that point, I had started tapering myself off of medications. Like I was a very good researcher. I did a lot of work around like I was like, I'm not taking this shit anymore. I was still on some. I was on Topamax still.
This is when you went to do the Iboga. You
were on Topamax. Yeah. And so, but I was told that I would have to taper off of everything. Yeah. Which I kind of was like, okay, let's just see how this goes. And so I did. And I went through the ceremony. And I have not started any medication since. And I know that medication is useful to people for sure. It was useful to me at times. Medication kept me profoundly disconnected from myself and profoundly unable to experience the complexity of emotions that existed for me in my body. That is a huge result of doing this work for me, is that I have not. And like, even like, I still get depressed. I still have suicidal ideation. Things are still here, still around. But yeah, it's not an option for me anymore to be on medication. And I do continued psychedelic work. Like I've worked with Iboga 3 times. I've worked with ayahuasca once. I've worked with ketamine. I've worked with salvia. I've worked with LSD. with mushrooms, MDMA. I mean, and always in like a very controlled, specific kind of way. Like I pretty much don't want to leave my house for any of it. I don't really, unless I'm like in the woods, and that's kind of nice. But like, yeah.
Did you experience anything shifting around the trichotillomania?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it goes back to the idea of like, none of these things are magic pills. They require a shit ton of work after. Yeah. They require integration work. They require changing your life in a lot of ways, really. Like, and Iboga's known to have this like kind of like glow period after, where it's like you are your neurotransmitters have completely been reset. Like a lot of stuff has happened in your brain, literally, from working with this plant. You're in a prime time to make changes. After each time that I've done Iboga, I have stopped pulling my hair for at least a month. I have not stopped entirely. I did Iboga for the last time in March or April of 2017. And I stopped drinking for a couple months after none of these were, like, I was just trying to stop pulling my hair and undo other work. But I did stop pulling my hair for 3 or 4 months. I went through a really traumatic breakup last summer. And so like it was cool that like for a while I wasn't pulling my hair. I wasn't even drinking coffee. I only drink coffee on the weekends. But like it just was just a little too much for me. I was like, I need fucking something here.
Oh, you're saying like when you went through the breakup, things got like, a little bit more like, okay, I need some of my coping
I think
skills.
Unconsciously, like I was just like, cool. I have like, it was really cool to go through like I was really struggling last summer. And it was also cool to be like, okay, I don't have any medications. I'm not drinking. I'm not pulling my hair. Not even drinking coffee. I'm going to have to be in this. I'm going to have to be in the feel, talk about abandonment feelings. There they are, like had to be in them. But I have not stopped pulling my hair entirely. It's a way more conscious experience now. Like I am like, it's like a conscious choice that I'm making for myself. It's way different though. And it's like, I also had one of the trips with Iboga, I had an experience also when I was like, again, because I had gone back and I was like, it's still happening. What, like, I know the root, I get it. But like, what is it? And like, I think it was the third ceremony, I had this voice, this me voice, where it was like, you don't have to hurt yourself anymore. Like, you don't have to hurt yourself. You can be done with it. You're like good. And so like that felt really profound to me too, where I was like, oh, wow, what a novel idea. I don't have to hurt myself, and that comes in and out of my consciousness.
That flashing neon dad, did that ever get interpreted for you as your inner dad, like your internalized experience of father, or I'm just wondering?
It did not.
No.
That's interesting. Do you want to say more?
Well, so for people who are listening, trichotillomania is considered a body-focused, repetitive behavior. Yeah. And it's also considered, you probably know, extremely difficult to treat. Like Very. Most people consider it something that you can't treat.
Yeah.
And as a psychotherapist, I've thought a lot about body-focused, repetitive behaviors. And there's something there that's, kind of... in ways an aggressive behavior towards the self. Mm-hmm. And just thinking symbolically about that, and I think I hesitate to say it's an attack on the self, in part because I know also a lot of times as survivors, we do things to ourselves that feel like they're a coping mechanism that actually helps us.
Yeah, totally.
So
they're both.
Living in the complexity, it's a lot of different things, but one thing totally is attacking the self. And it sounds like you have experienced violence with your dad where he's attacking you.
Yeah.
And that you're talking about having doing the hair pulling since you were a kid. And so, sometimes we internalize the harm that we're caused and we kind of create like an internalized abuser that oftentimes keeps us safe in certain ways. Yeah. And then there comes a time when it's not as safe to keep that sort of internalized state, either to keep it around or I think in a lot of ways to keep it as a dissociated sort of separate part of you.
Yeah.
So as a psychotherapist, like obviously I work a lot with people's, inner critic, inner whoever, inner mean part.
Yeah.
And there's this way that it can feel like it's really separate.
Yeah.
Like it's like there's me and then there's that.
Yeah, totally.
And I hate that part.
Yeah.
And that part hates me. And
fights of the parts.
Yeah. I think there's really something to be said about getting to know that part.
Yeah.
What's going on with that part. Kind of almost, it sounds like in the way that you're saying in your experiences, you kind of got to know your dad a little more in just understanding that his violence is coming from a place of his own hurt. And, the same I would say for any of our kind of inner abusive, mean parts, is that a lot of times that's a way we're protecting ourselves, but it's also a way that part of us is just so wounded.
Yeah, I very much relate to that for sure. And I think like that is something that also has shifted for me with psychedelic work, where it's like those parts are still there, but like they have they're way less in control. And it's interesting because alongside doing all this psychedelic work, I also discovered breathwork, which is this active practice, is really profound and powerful. And it's like a whole other conversation, but like it also helps you access this like altered state or another type of reality that's always existing alongside this one. And I also was working with a trauma, like specifically like sexual violence and trauma informed therapist, which like surprisingly, like I actually hadn't experienced having a very trauma informed therapist up until my like early 30s. Like I had a lot of therapists who like quite frankly did not know what the fuck to do with me. But they were also a somatic therapist, and like that's another thing where I was like, oh, my body gets to be in the room for once, which like again, I'm like, how are we not always so many spaces I had not had that experience where it was like my body was also in the room of like working through the violence that I had experienced in my body. So
I'm glad that you're bringing it back there, because that's something that is so important with this sort of one pill kind of go off and do something and it's going to change your whole life narrative that's somewhat developing in the mainstream, that integration work is really important.
Yeah.
And it sounds like with all these different medicines you've done, and especially the one you've talked the most about today, Iboga, such a profound experience, so much information coming to you in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have done a lot of work in between your medicine experiences.
Yeah.
And continue to do a lot of work integrating the information that has come to you in ceremony.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, to some degree, it's like, I recently worked with LSD, which I want to talk about more in a second, but like during that experience, I was like, life is the ceremony. Life is actually the work.
Absolutely.
Like, so it's like, I'm doing these ceremonies, but then like ceremony is happening all the time. Life is happening all the time. And so when I come out of them, it's like, it's sometimes I'm like, I wish I had stronger regular practices to help me really like take the work out into myself in the rest of my life. But like I do breath work. I think breath work is really useful. It's also like breath work that when I practice in particular, it's a way of like touching back down into that place that I experienced with psychedelics, where it's like, oh, okay, I get it. I know myself. My wisest self is here.
Yeah.
I know some things. Like I can go back into that with breath work, which I think is helpful. I work with a lot of people too in like the psychedelic world who do breath work with me, because it's like, it's a way of accessing those places without taking something. And I work with a lot of people that are sober. I work a lot in like substance misuse and like harm reduction contexts, doing writing workshops and working with people. And so like people are coming for different reasons when I do breath work. But for me, that's been a really powerful tool. I'm also an herbalist, so I work with herbs. Like that's my primary mental health support system. Relationship with plants is really important for me. And also, like I think that I was pretty lost for a lot of my life. And I was actually just talking to a dear friend last night. I was like, I'm kind of a late bloomer. I'm turning 37 soon. And my life is looking how I want it to look. Like I'm doing the work I want to do. I believe and trust that I can do this work. I have this before and after photo of me when I first did Iboga. And it's like, I look like a tiny little troll. Like I'm just like bent over, like it's just like I'm bent over or something. Like there's a way where my whole body has shifted. Like I mean, the picture after, it's like I look different. It was 3 days, you know? So there are immediate things that happen. There's ongoing work that will be continuing with me forever.
This part about integration is so important. Jennifer is someone who helps people integrate these experiences as a professional and is obviously very dedicated to the importance of integration, but it is often a part of the process that gets lost in the larger conversation around entheogens and psychedelics. I wouldn't want anyone to listen to this series and think that people are doing this healing work around very serious instances of trauma, relatively alone or without the support of many other people and healing modalities. I asked Jennifer about the lasting impacts of her psychedelic work on her trauma, and I think what she says next really illustrates the reality of doing this work, that it is a lot more complex than just one big tripped out journey that forever ends your suffering.
You know, it's so hard to piece out like what psychedelics did or what other things did. I think for me, it's like a really messy, woven situation of like all these things impacting each other. But like maybe my third ceremony with Iboga, where one of the visions I had was I was given an award by, I don't know who, it was just like a hand that handed me this like framed award, and it was an award for being happy and well-adjusted, which is hilarious to me because like that is the furthest thing I like, and I don't, those aren't even words that I like need to be okay, but like that feeling, I'm just like, what a hilarious idea. Like, that's never going to happen. But there are fractions of it happening for me where I'm like, oh, okay. Like, and also I think I talk a lot with people about like finding this place of okayness where it's like, by nature, I'm a depressed person. I'm a pessimist. Like all those words that we use to like just name like what often people are having to hold and carry and live with. So that's like my baseline. I think there is like more joy in my life. There's a little more curiosity. There's a little more like, even if I only experience that sense of okayness for a second during breathwork, during like a traumatic experience, or like last summer it was very hard, like breathwork, or when I first found breathwork, I was going through like a very hard loss of my dog, which brought up a lot of my unresolved trauma. It's like I can go into it and find one spot where like a tiny part of me is okay and knows it very deeply.
A lot of the emphasis in US culture around psychedelics is on how it can heal PTSD and other issues for individual people who have been victims of trauma. Focusing on the individual is a common way that we think about healing in dominant US culture. There is less conversation about the work of recognizing and healing ourselves collectively, or about the healing that is necessary as the people who actually perpetuate acts of violence. However, in this last part of our conversation, Jennifer shares about some aspects of her journeys that have connected her to a larger sense of collective history and shared experience in the world that we live in.
You know, like with Iboga, a lot of people talk about like seeing your ancestors. And there's this way too where I feel like when I've heard like largely like a lot of white men talking about their Iboga experiences, it's like they're connected to traditional African people, or like the mother, like the like African mother or the African father, always in this very gendered way, which when I have worked with Iboga, I see all kinds of people. Like, yes, I see like the spirit of Iboga, but also like what I think is often left out of the conversation is like, I've seen my own ancestors who are white people, who were colonizers, who were like Vikings. Like my great grandpa was in the IRA in Ireland and was deported. There's a lot of complexity in my own lineage that like is also a part of me. It's like, I'm not just seeing these like mystical, spiritually, like kind of like exploited visions. I'm seeing the full breadth of like what I'm carrying. And I think that's an important part of the conversation that I often don't hear white people talking about, is like when I am seeing my ancestors, like who are actually my ancestors. There's a lot of violence there, a lot of violence that it has been done to other people. And I think like I see a lot of catastrophic imagery too, like for years, for the first Iboga ceremony and on, like, and I don't always know what to do with this. I think it's more of like sitting in this in between, or in this reality. It's like a lot of us know like the world's pretty fucked right now in major ways, but it feels like another thing entirely to know it on a psychedelic. The first time I worked with Iboga, which was 4.5 years ago, there was a part where I was flying over, I had like an eagle's eye view over the entire world, and everything was burning, which is like, yes, it truly is burning. And like, I remember I zoomed down over like DC, and this was before Trump was elected. And what I saw was like a lot of big bobbleheads with like Trump hair bobbling around and like burning everything to the ground. And there were all these dollar signs that were flying out of the city. And I also had this experience with LSD just last weekend where I had made the mistake of looking at my cell phone during. It was the first time I worked with LSD. It was an incredibly powerful experience in a lot of ways and something I really enjoyed. I also looked at my phone to, again, take a note because I love taking notes. But my like other part of my brain was like, let's go on Instagram. So I went on Instagram. And the first thing, I mean, it was like a comic. It was like the first thing that showed up was this image, and it was like heart, 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 like, and it was just like everything was vibrating, and there was like, and just like all of this like kind of like popping out. But the image I saw was this person, I'm just gonna credit them, Rachel Rice on Instagram, who had done a poll. And I think the question was something like, are you a survivor of sexual violence? And they posted the result of the poll, and it was like 86% of the people polled said yes, and 14 said no. And for whatever reason, like, I know the stats, and I think like it was much bigger than just sexual violence. It was like, to me, it was like the amount of people that know like deep ongoing systemic, cultural, interpersonal violence is catastrophic. And my girlfriend was with me, and I just completely froze, and it broke something in me again, where I was just like, it's too late. Like, I keep having this feeling of like, okay, what if it's too late? Like, what do we do then? Like, what does justice look like if it's too late? What does, like, healing look like if the worst is already happening? It's already happening. And I don't mean to like, it's too late and to like lull us into like inactivity, but like letting that be like a place of activation. Like so what does that mean then? But like, what was wild is and then I had just like tears streaming down my face, and I was like silent crying at first. And then I felt like I was crying about violence in a way I had from like a depth I had never actually accessed before. And then when I was trying to explain it to my girlfriend, because she like saw, like, she was kind of just like, let's put the phone away. And she was like, I know that that's not just the phone, and I was like, I could not pull myself out of it. And it actually, I just like it, and it was wild because like all of the color dropped out of the room, it was dusk, but like it literally just got dark, and I couldn't tell if it actually had gotten dark. And we were in the woods, and I saw all these lights, like car lights, driving down off, and I don't even know if there were actually cars, but it happened at the split second that I like saw that, and I had this experience, and all these cars were driving out of the woods, and like one of the only things I could say was, they're taking down the trees. They're like taking down the trees right now. They're doing it right now. And we're just here, sitting here while they're taking down the trees.
All right. A heavy but real note to end on. Ironically, this type of medicine work has a reputation for altering one's consciousness, almost as if it takes us out of our experience. But in reality, it often just takes us deeper into the present moment. And the present moment includes some pretty intense destruction of our world, environmentally, culturally, collectively. You know that saying, hurt people hurt people? In making this series, I have thought a lot about the larger purpose behind my work. If we can't even take care of ourselves, how will we continue to take care of this earth that we need to survive? How will we take care of each other, who we also need to survive? Healing ourselves and growing our capacities to steward this land and care for our communities is a radical and essential act for our collective survival. I want to thank Jennifer for being willing to do this interview and share so much of her personal story and offer her wisdom and thoughts about entheogens, psychedelics, integration, and the state of the world. If you're interested to learn more about her work, check her out on Instagram. Her handle is @CorpusRitual, which is the same name as her healing practice. She offers breathwork locally in New York City and globally through video call. And if you haven't yet, definitely check out the anthology she edited, Queering Sexual Violence. My favorite essay in the book is called Queering Child Sexual Abuse by Amita Yalgi Swadin. It just adds such a richness to the intersections between sexual abuse and sexuality. There are links to connect with Jennifer and other things that we referenced in the show notes. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the podcast or share it with a friend. If you'd like to stay connected, find me on the gram. My handle is @LauraMayNorthrup. And finally, special thanks to Joey Seward at Left Field Studios for volunteering a lot of additional audio engineering to make this series possible. If you need an audio engineer, he's excellent. You can find his website in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Inside Eyes. Until next time.